Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's in My Head podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Cunningham. If you've heard that name before, you've probably seen SpongeBob, you've seen Camp Coral, you've seen the Patrick Star Show, and a couple other things that we're going to talk about. Dave, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, man. So I think we should just get into the thick of it. When was the first day that you popped up on the SpongeBob casting crew, man? Do you remember that first day?
You know, I remember the first episode, and I remember the first few weeks. And the first episode I worked on of SpongeBob was Wig Struck. It was a few episodes into the fourth season. And shared an office with Brad Vandegrift, who's still on the show as well. And at that time, Sharon Cohen had recently left the show, and they were kind of still transitioning to who the new storyboard supervisor was going to be. Ultimately, it ended up being Clint Bond. But at that time, Vince Waller was kind of stepping in. And yeah, I actually remember even like the revisions that got called on my work on that first episode as well. Yeah, it was a great show, great experience. And I had been coming from two very stylized shows in a row, Fairly Odd Parents and My Life as a Teenage Robot. So it took me a while. It took me actually probably a few years to get all that designiness worked out of my drawings. But yeah, it was. I was very fortunate. I felt like I'd won the lottery, to be honest, because openings back then on SpongeBob were very rare, and you know, when I worked on this show for like the first 11 years, like the crew did not change at all. It was the same team the entire time. So you didn't have opportunities to get onto the show very often. Happens a little more nowadays because the business is a little more, you know, just overall as people are just moving around a little more now these days than they used to. But yeah, I'd worked on a lot of shows over the years. So getting an opportunity to work on SpongeBob, which I was a fan of before I worked on, was a thrill.
Now, I've told this story a couple different times on a couple different podcasts, but whenever you're the first person I've actually had on from the SpongeBob universe. So I wanted to share this one with you. I remember before SpongeBob was actually coming out, like I said, I'm from Orlando, Florida. And my father had taken me and my younger brother to Universal Studios back in like the early 90s, well, mid 90s at this point. And they had already started production on SpongeBob. Right. Yeah. They were doing the drawings and stuff. And this is before Nickelodeon Studios had shifted completely over to the West Coast. So they still had a little bit in Orlando and stuff like that, but it was a very bare minimum crew. Right. And when we're going through the gate to get into Universal Studios, they're handing out tickets. They say, hey, we're doing this new show. It's being produced by Nickelodeon Studios for kids. It's an animated show. Come by. We want to show people some stuff that they were working on. So you couldn't go down into the main floor. So it was up on the second story when you're walking inside the building, and you look down and you see board artists and stuff like that. But they had model figures of, you know, SpongeBob, who else? Mr. Krabs, Sandy and Patrick and Squidward and all these other people, right? So they had model designs and stuff like that. And there was this board artist down there, or an artist, he kept ripping shit down, right? He would draw something, he's like, oh, fuck, I don't like that. He would rip it down. Now I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to be an animator when I was real young, right? Everything I thought I did was really cool. I could see something, I could copy it, and I could do it, right? I could do that. But this guy just kept ripping stuff down. And the little person we had on us that was doing the tour guide stuff, hey, why is he tearing that stuff down and throwing it away? He had his waste basket just full of trash. She's like, well, if it's not meets the specs or it doesn't match the models or anything like that, he has to redo it. And I was like, holy shit, everything that he's doing looks really, really cool, looks really, really good. And my mom would hang that up on the refrigerator. At that point in time, I knew I would not be an animator and I would have to completely change my life ambitions as it went on. So I got to see like the early beginnings. Like I said, it was a very, very small crew. There wasn't too many people there from what I could remember. And plus I was really, really small. But I remember just being super psyched for the show. And when this show hit, I was like, holy shit, the game's done changed. You know, back then I was strictly just Cartoon Network. And then when SpongeBob rolled around, you know, I was a huge Hey Arnold fan. But when SpongeBob came around, I'm like, man, there's going to be a reason to click over to Nickelodeon now from Cartoon Network and from Disney. When SpongeBob is hot and heavy for you, how long after getting on that crew did you know, like, holy shit, this is hot. We need to get just pushing and pushing and pushing?
Well, I mean, I joined fourth season, so it was already hot when I joined. I
Yeah.
knew it was good. When I first heard about the show, before I had even seen it, I was very excited and intrigued by the name of it. Just SpongeBob Squarepants. It was
Yeah.
unlike anything I had heard going on. It just sounded, extremely silly and, unlike anything else that was on TV at the time. And I was like, that sounds like a fun show. And then when the show came out, I was a fan. I mean, you know, there was names that I actually knew before I worked with the people that I recognized from the credits. Like, when you like a show, I think you just kind of pick up on the names that you affiliate with the show. And, I mean, just in production people, Noelle and Derek Iverson and then all the artists, the Andy Clarks and the Vincent Wallers and Paul Tibbets and just all the, the big names, Sharon Cohen. So when I got on the show, I mean, I had a few friends I'd worked with that were in the storyboard department, Tom King and a bunch of people. Yeah, I felt like I joined an all-star team, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I still do. When you work in the business for a long time, I think you appreciate when you get to work on a quality product, B, with the best people in the business and on a show that people watch. I mean, it hits on all cylinders. That's all you'd possibly want when you're working in animation is to get challenged creatively, to, work around people that are, more talented than yourself, and to have people watch your show, for better or for worse. They love it, they hate it, but, the worst was going through your career working on shows and, a niece saying, "What are you working on now, Uncle Dave?" And you mention it and it just look of just complete, it doesn't, nothing's registering at all. Like, "Oh, that's a show, huh? That's cute." No response whatsoever. They've never heard it, never heard of it, never seen it, anything. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I joined. It was after the first film, and they were a smooth running machine, and I just jumped in there and held on for dear life. And like I said, there were times, I'd be in a meeting with like Vincent Waller, and I go, "Holy shit, I'm in a meeting with Vincent Waller, man. This is Ren and Stimpy Vince Waller here." And, Paul Tibbet and, Tuck Tucker, all these big names, that I had admired for so long. Yeah, I mean, I still do look up to all those people. I just, but those early days, yeah, man, I felt like I was a rookie that had made its way onto an all-star team. So.
That's awesome. Now, you brought up a name that I wanted to circle back to for just a second, because his name came up and we just lost him not too long ago, but Tuck Tucker, man. So his name came up. This is the second or third time his name has came up in a couple episodes now. But he came up with Jim Lang, the composer for Hey Arnold. And Jim Lang told a really cool story. When anybody passes away that's no longer here, that I absolutely wish, we could see more from, man, because like I said, his name popped up in so many different credits and so many different shows. And it's one of those guys. It's like, shit, man, I wish he was still here. I'm pretty sure you working with him, you have that echo that same sentiment. But do you have a story or a memory with Tuck that whenever you hear his name, that's the first thing you think of?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with him for, I don't know how many years it was. He was working on SpongeBob. He came on after I'd been there for a little bit, and then he worked with us through the second film. I think he retired back to West Virginia, I believe it was, before we did the second film. Yeah, he was a character, man. I had a girlfriend that was in the business at the time that had worked with him before I worked with him, and she had just said he's a ton of fun. He's a great guy. You'll love working with him. And it was never boring with Tuck.
Yeah.
He was a big April Fool's Day guy, and everybody's got April Fool's Day, stories about Tuck, and some handled it better than others. But there was one day when when you're storyboarding, you're knee deep in it, and you're focused, and you're in your cubicle, and you're not paying attention to anything around you. You're just doing your job. You're answering your phone. You're listening to your music. You're doing, you're really insulated. And there was one time when, I used to take the train to work and to and from work. And there was one day I was like on the train and it was like, it's like, for whatever reason, like I just wipe my ears and like it was just like a really like oily or something. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like, God, like I was wiping, and like the whole night I was wiping. And I was like, what the hell, man? Like it was like some glandular issue or something. And the next morning, Tuck came by. It was April 2nd. He was like, hey, so I forget how he worded it, but it turns out that he had come in early. He always would come in early on April Fool's Day, and he had put honey all over the receiver of my phone, and then particularly called me. And I had so focused. I had just, put that thing right to my ear with all the honey. I didn't even realize I was doing it. And I spent all day with like just honey, just completely caking my ear. And so anyway, he would do that almost every April. It was like the biggest holiday a year for Tuck was April Fool's Day. But yeah, man, it was really devastating blow when we lost him. And he had a big influence on a lot of people, experienced and a lot of people that have only been in the business for a few years. Even after he left the show, he continued to reach out to people on the show. He would have, there's a few people that he had Zoom into his classes to talk to his classes. And he would occasionally reach out to Adam Polowian and I and recommend artists that he thought we could use that he really liked. Adam himself, Adam Polowian was someone that came onto our show during the second movie, and then joined us in the second film, and then stayed with us on the series, and ultimately became the third director with Sherm and I. He was someone that was referred to Sherm by Tuck Tucker, and Adam is like a force in animation right now. He's a super talent.
Beautiful. So, thank you for sharing that story, man. I really appreciate it. Whenever somebody is no longer here that, like you said, has just influenced and touched so many lives. And, I always like just giving, I don't want to say giving back, but, the stories will never end. Somebody's legacy will never end as long as we continue to bring it up. You look like you're about to say something. What are you going to say?
I just remembered an even better story about Tuck. So I don't want to turn this into a Tuck, podcast. But so this was, I don't know, I have no idea what year this was, but we had gotten a new coffee maker at Nickelodeon. And it was a real nice machine, and it brewed delicious coffee, but it brewed very hot coffee. And we had this the kitchen for SpongeBob, like all studios, it's like just a large cubicle. You go in there, you get your stuff out of the fridge or get your coffee, then you go around a corner and go back to your cube. Well, one time I was coming around a corner with my coffee, and someone else was coming right around the corner, so I had to stop. And when I stopped, that hot coffee poured all over my hand. It was all over my drawing hand, and it was really, really bad. And and Tuck, I'd mentioned to Tuck, I was like, listen, I'm going to try to draw through right now. My hand feels like it's on fire, and then I'm going to try to just keep on working. And he was like, well, listen, I got this home remedy, and it's I'll brew you this poppy seed mixture thing that something he had done back home when he was growing up, something he knew. He had a lot of like his little home remedies he would recommend we try out. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'm just gonna take a couple Advils, see if I can just blast through this. And I took the Advil, I was sitting there drawing. It was getting worse and worse. It was like I can feel my heartbeat in my hand. It was like it's looking really bad. And then Tuck just shows up in my entrance to my cubicle and said, "Here it is." And he'd gone next door to 7-Eleven. He had somehow found the poppy seed, to put in there and steep it with the hot water. And he said, "Stir it up and sip this, and it'll help with the pain. It'll make it a lot better." So at that point I was like, okay, well, he went through all this effort. I'll give it a shot. And I drank it, and yes, the pain got better, but then I started mentally flipping out. I think I was tripping while I was at work because I was drinking this, probably, I don't know. I don't know drugs that all I know is that mentally I was soaring, somewhere else there. And, wasn't thinking about my hand, but I wasn't thinking about work either for a few hours. So, But so I'm pretty sure Tuck got me high at work.
Tuck dosed you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. So you're working, it's hot and heavy, everything's cooking on SpongeBob, right? Now I've asked this question because it's an interesting question to ask, and everybody's got a different method. At what point in time did you start feeling comfortable working on the show? And I mean that by, like, a lot of people will go on a show and they feel like they never got the characters like they should have. Was there a point where you're like, holy shit, I know everything about these characters, I'm feeling these characters, or was it still just a learning curve on a day-to-day basis now?
I still don't. I mean, I think as an artist, I don't think we ever really feel totally comfortable. I don't think, I think it's, I think there's always going to be a struggle as an artist, and if you ever, in my opinion, if I ever feel like I've arrived and like I haven't, I know it all, I figured it all out, then what's the point, of continuing? I mean, there definitely were moments where, where I felt like there were, hills I got over, or like just hurdles, like maybe going to the next tier, or maybe having an insight that kind of opened my eyes and were game changers, so to speak. I mean, when I was on the plussing team doing boards for the first, whatever, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it was, it would change. It would, my success or failure would change from episode to episode. I mean, you could turn in a section that goes fantastic, 2 weeks later turn another section and it's not so good. And not the, I wasn't doing a horrible job or anything, but like as any artist, you're going up and down. I mean,
peaks and valleys.
Just part of being an artist. It's an emotional thing. Sometimes you're happy with something and someone isn't. Sometimes you're both happy, which is perfect. Or so no, I mean, I wouldn't say I ever really felt comfortable ever, before the second film. But when we got to the second film, that's when I worked in story for the first half of my time there, and then character layout for the second half of my time. And that was an eye-opening time for me. That's when all of our work as artists were going directly to the people in charge. They were going directly to Steve and Paul and Vince. And not that there was any issue with the people that were looking over our work before, but the fact that I was actually able to get my work seen directly by those eyes was exciting to me. And it got me motivated really to do my best work and to see, that there was more that could be done with the characters, that there was a higher ceiling than I really ever before. There was a certain amount of, well, I can do this, but it'll get shot down, or this department might, nix it or whatever. But, the fact that we're actually being able to do artwork and it going straight to the top and getting seen by the eyes I want it seen by was invigorating. And, I felt motivated. I felt driven. And, I made a decision. I did not want to turn in any work that I was not 100% happy with. Yeah. And at that point, because I've been working in the business for a long time at that point, and there's the limitations of schedule that always get in the way too. But I think at that point, I had gotten to a point in my career where I could balance the two things. I could actually make sure that I was happy with whatever I was doing, and at the same time hitting deadlines and staying on schedule. The movie schedule also was very different from the TV schedule too. It was much less grinding than the TV schedule.
Really?
Yes.
Why is that? I figured it'd be the opposite, if anything.
Oh no! I mean, when we were doing story, they would hand out requests to the story team, say we want like pitch art. We want to pitch these ideas, these scenes, these sequences to Paramount. So they give us like a description of what they wanted, and and we'd be like, okay, well, what do you need that? Like 2 hours, 3 hours? What do you need this by? And they'd be like, yeah, a week and a half.
Really?
Yeah, they'd give you time to like render things out, color, work it out, maybe come up with a few variations. And that's not the kind of stuff you don't get to do that kind of stuff when you're in TV animation. It's like, bam, bam, bam. I mean, you gotta get through an episode. You got to go through thousands of panels when you're, boarding in TV. and it's just was a different vibe. I mean, when we got to character layout, the pace definitely picked up quite a bit. But I never on the movie, I never quite felt as hurried and stressed as I do in TV animation. And it was a great experience. I thoroughly enjoyed working on the film. I'm proud of the product that we created. I think it's a good film. Especially all the two-dimensional stuff that we worked on most heavily. We worked on some of the CG stuff as well, but anyway, that was the reason I brought up the movie was because that's when I think I felt free to kind of go for it and let myself show a little bit, and that's when I got noticed by Paul Tibbett and Steve and Vince, I think, and that's what led into me moving into a supervising job when we came back to the TV show. So yeah, there were just, I would say there were, I would say as an animation artist, there were not moments where all of a sudden like I got this now. There were moments where there's clarity, where I felt like I knew what I had to do, and it was that was my experience anyway, where I knew, it's nice. It's nice when you have that clarity, at least for me, where I know what I need to do to succeed here. And I think I knew what I needed to do to succeed when we were on the film. And when we came back, I knew what I had to do to succeed as a supervisor. But yeah, it's a good question. And I'm not sure I really answered it or not.
Oh, but, you did. Yeah, you did.
But yeah, I look back on my career, and there were moments where I felt like opportunity presented itself, and I was able to take advantage. And I think that's a lot of what this business is there's a lot of luck involved and a lot of opportunity that just presents itself. And the key is to take advantage and step up to the plate when you get those opportunities. I worked early in my career, was kind of struggling to find work when I was first getting started, and I wasn't any good, and worked at a internet animation company called Icebox.com. It was like probably the year 2000, and that was a wonderful opportunity for me. And that was another opportunity where I felt like I saw, it was kind of a small pool, and I felt like I was actually a big fish in that small pool. And I saw opportunity, and out of that opportunity, I was able to excel. And I made some contacts. I worked on a show called Zombie College, which turned out very well. I met Eric Kaplan, who was a part of Futurama, and he ended up doing a big show at CBS, a big sitcom. He was a big part of it for a really long time. But anyway, Eric Kaplan became, he helped me get into Futurama, and then that steamrolled into more work. And just moments where opportunity presented itself, and you just got to be ready to step up and to meet the challenge.
Yeah, 100%, man. As soon as that door gets cracked open, you just got to kick it in so people know your name and people know what you're about.
Yeah, what was really special about, and I know I'm jumping all over the place here, I apologize. But
no, you're fine. We're going to jump all over the place.
Icebox was a great experience. It was a Flash animation company, and it was back when bandwidth was still an issue. And so that's why Flash was created, so we could view animation on the internet, because we'd make these cartoons, and each cartoon had to have like some little bit of like very, very simple animation happening while you got the loading message, while the animated show was loading. And we did a lot of shows at Icebox, and there was a lot of super talent that was involved in Icebox. It was run by Hollywood executives. The whole idea behind Icebox was that they were going to get the best talent they could find, the best writers, the best talent, and tell them, come bring the shows you want to make to Icebox. We will animate them for you and pitch them for you. And if they get picked up by a network, then we take a percentage or whatever it is. they had Larry David had a show there, John Kay had a show there, a ton of big names had shows there. And so as artists, we would work on every single show had a completely different sensibility, completely different look to it. A ton of different styles were represented at Icebox. And that was a great skill building experience, where you had to work on a show for like a couple months and then completely shift gears and work on another show that had a completely different look and sensibility to it. And it was a great exercise, and a lot of fun too, because if you're working on a show that you're not a big fan of, you're going to be moving on to something else in a couple months. And so that was fantastic. There was, basically what happened with Icebox is they burnt through, from what I hear, they burnt through $16 million in 1 year. And then the bubble burst on the internet, and poof went Icebox, and we all scattered to the wind. But it served me well, like I said, because it got me onto Futurama. And and it kind of gave my career a boost when it really needed it.
So we'll get back to SpongeBob here in just a few, but you brought up Futurama a couple of times. We talked about it before we hit record too. Excuse me. I had Billy West on here not too long ago. Obviously, for ladies and gentlemen, if you know Billy West, you know everything he's done. He was the voice of Fry, Doug Funny, and then he did some stuff. And he did a little show called Ren and Stimpy back in the day as well. And they're starting to bring back Ren and Stimpy now. Apparently, that's the I don't want to say it's the talk at the water cooler or whatever, but I think I saw an article about Ren and Stimpy possibly coming back very soon too to Nickelodeon, and Billy being a part of it. What was the first, I don't want to say the first day of Futurama, be on the Futurama cast and crew like, but does anything about that first day stick out to you? Obviously, we're going to remember a couple different things. We'll remember probably our first day, our last day, whenever we're somewhere, right? Because those are the most vivid in our memories. Because generally the first day is when you make the biggest mistakes you'll ever make. And then the last day is generally like, oh shit, they threw me a party. They made me a cake. They hired X, Y, and Z. Something memorable stuck out. But do you remember what that was like coming to the cast and crew of Futurama?
Well, it was being done by Rough Draft in Glendale. And I guess at the same time they were wrapping up Baby Blues, which is another show. And before I was going to Futurama, they wanted me to help out with Baby Blues. So I helped out with that show for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before I moved on to Futurama. Mm-hmm. But it was funny. The Baby Blues was located down in the basement below Futurama. And
they wanted you guys away.
Yeah. And Futurama, I got moved up to still see sunlight. But it seemed like a very tight crew on Futurama, and one had been together for a while. So it's kind of, I definitely felt like, a new kid when I worked on Futurama. But, it was a supreme, crew. I mean, they had some great storyboard artists. They had an amazing layout department. A lot of people that I met a lot of people that I'm still friends with today in the business from that experience. But it was also pretty cramped quarters in there too. I remember sharing a cubicle with Steve Fonte, and I remember the Claudia, I believe was her name, ran the studio, and she had a dog that she brought into the studio, and the dog would just wander around. And there were times if you're sitting there working and you just feel like a dog sniffing your butt or your crotch while you're sitting there working.
It is a cool dog.
Everyone just rolled with it. It was just, I mean, it didn't bother me really. So, but yeah, I mean, that was like one of the first experiences I had working on a show that really placed quality on a high, really put a supreme focus on making sure that the episodes were high, the highest quality they could be, where they were continually trying to make them good until the last second. We do that on SpongeBob as well, and I know they do that on Simpsons as well, where it's not like a lot of shows where you have the schedule, you bam 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 off, and then it hits the air, that's it. But on Futurama, they were continually refreshing jokes and trying to make things funnier and better all the time, all the way up to air date. And working when you work for people that and you believe in their ability to make a quality product, that does wonders for the morale of your crew and
Oh yeah.
the motivation of your crew too. And that's a big thing with like a Futurama or Simpsons or a SpongeBob, where and one of the things I noticed right about SpongeBob was like, these guys are not going to let a crappy episode on the air. They're just, I mean, there may be episodes you like more or less than others, but they're not going to let a crappy episode on the air. It's just there's too much. These people running a show are not going to let it happen.
Yeah.
So, but Futurama was great. I mean, that was probably the first primetime style animation I'd done. And I guess Icebox had a lot of that kind of stuff too. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot and got to work with some really talented people, Ron Hugard and Pete Amenzino, and just a lot of really talented folks on that show. Met some people that I know today. I think Tom King was on that, and Jeanette King, and Jeanette Tolentino. Anyway, yeah, a lot of really wonderful talent on that show.
So it's crazy. You had mentioned that you apologize for jumping all over the place. If ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far, which you have, because we're having a great conversation here, this chat's kind of go like you guys' IMDb credits. We start here, we might go here, but if you tell me you got, and I've said this a couple of times, but if you tell me you got a haircut the other day by a dude that pretends to be a pirate, I want to hear that story just as much as I want to hear about what your first day here or there or anything like that was where. But so we're going to jump back to SpongeBob for just a second, because you brought up something that I wanted to touch upon. But when you have and you see something like you were just talking about, the cast and the crew is always trying to make a joke better, always trying to do something edgier, trying to push the envelope so they can put out the best product, right? What are some of the, I don't want to say, well, I guess I'll just go ahead and say that way. What are some of the things that you've taken from the supervisors that you've, specifically worked for or worked with, or some of the people that you've looked up to that might have been a boss or, just a supervisor, I guess, and try to implement them the way that you lead a team now? Does anything stick out the most to you that you try to absorb from somebody? Obviously, you're going to take something that you don't like from somebody, make sure you never implement that. We've all seen that in leaders. If he does it that way and I don't like it, I'm not going to put that in my way because I want to do it this way. But is there anything specifically working on the SpongeBob crew now that you try to implement?
I mean, I've worked in the business for a long enough time that I've really seen a transformation in the business. The business really is nothing at all like it was when I first got into it. I remember getting notes that, if I left today would get me fired within 15 minutes. What the F is this? And, things scrawled out on storyboard pages. And, I mean, of course, that's like, no brainer stuff. You don't do that kind of thing with artists. I would say I work with Sharon Cohen, and I really have a great amount of respect for Sherm as an artist and as someone that I feel like knows how deals with his team in an effective way. I would say it's really the business. There's been a lot of last 5 years, a lot of greener artists entering the business, which has kind of changed the business and the complexion of the business. And, so the kind of old school way of doing things is not, really applicable anymore, where you just kind of you're the director, you get it in, you judge it, you send it back. I mean, it's more interactive now. There's more of a relationship with the team, more of an effort to support and to teach, especially because there's so many people that are getting into the business now that may not have 10 years ago, because there's just so much work out there right now, and especially in a style of animation like ours, which is kind of like that squash and stretch cartoony animation. There's just so much going on out there like that now, from Cuphead to Animaniacs to Looney Tunes to Mickey Mouse to Milmo's Post. I mean, there's just so many shows now that are in this style, And so, we used to have this kind of pool of talent to ourselves, and now we're just fighting, we're fighting over talent, and
Yeah.
we're fighting to discover new people too. And we found some fantastic people over the years, and we continue to. So that's kind of part of of it too. I would say the director I am today is different from the director I was 5 years ago. I try to learn, become better at what I'm doing, better for my team. I'm probably more hands-on now than I've ever been with my team. As far as people I've worked with that have made a big impact, when we were working on the second film, when I was on story, we all worked under Eric Weiss, and Eric is absolutely one of the most talented people I've worked with in the business. And I felt like I learned a lot from him, and I remain an enormous fan of his work. Mighty B, I think, is just absolutely brilliant. And that was a really great experience. And it was inspiring too, because he poured absolutely everything into what he did, and a very, very passionate guy. But I got the best of two worlds, because when we finished story, then Sherm stepped in for character layout, and that was like a dream come true to work with Sherm. I'd never worked with Sherm before, and in working with Sherm in the character layout department, I discovered that there's like nobody, in my opinion, that knows these characters like Sharon Cohen. And he draws them the best. He knows their appeal. He knows their ins and outs really, really well. And he's just a super talented guy to boot, and really knowledgeable about the business. He draws all day and does cartoons all day, and then he goes home and watches cartoons all night a lot of times. And so there was a funny thing is when we came back to work on the series after working on the second film, and I was offered a supervising position, there was a very small part of me that was slightly bummed that I was not going to be able to work with Sherman anymore, because I was going to be working, alongside him. But yeah, I mean, as far as people I've worked with, that I've worked with plenty of people that I wouldn't necessarily, follow their lead as far as the way they've supervised. I think I've gotten a lot of examples of how not to lead, to be honest. I mean, that's not me bad mouthing anybody. It's just, that's the kind of stuff that sticks. Like, I don't want to do it this way. And like I said, any examples that I come up with aren't really applicable anymore either, because like I said, the whole way you direct and supervise now is really transformed. It's a different role than it used to be, just for multiple reasons.
Now, with that being said, if you took the money factor completely out of it, right? So if money was no option, and obviously as you come into this industry, you're going to be trying a whole bunch of different things. And I didn't really notice this until I had, I'm sure you know him or you've worked with him. You've been in this industry for quite some time. Chris Battle?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he told me when he came in that they would just throw him wherever they needed somebody, because you come in as you're like almost like a journeyman. You're trying to get experience. You're learning from somebody. They put you with a veteran. So you try to learn the ins and outs of the industry. And he said he would bounce from, BG's backgrounds. You'd bounce to here, or character, or cleanup, or side by side. He'd just do a whole bunch of different things. And I asked him, I'm like, well, what is the most gratifying position for you specifically in your entire career? Because you guys can go so many different ways as a storyboard artist, right? And he's like, I really like the character designs. He's like, when I was a kid, it was all about who can draw Batman, who can draw Superman. So with me posing all of that information behind this question, if you had to just completely take money out of it, so you didn't have to worry about if you were going to make how much money you're making now or then or whatever it is, do you still feel do you still have the same gratification for directing as you do storyboarding? Or if you could go back to storyboarding, would you love to do storyboarding again? Or are you pretty content where you're at now?
I feel like I'm and I can say this honestly, I 100% am happy doing what I'm doing now, because I feel like I've got more of an ability to have a vision and see it through than I did before with storyboarding, or see the vision that a storyboard artist has, and make sure that is followed through on. which is a lot of, a lot of times that's the case. Before, when you're a storyboard artist, you turn it in, you hope they like it, and then it goes off, and where it ends up, you never know. And a lot of times you see the animated product and you're like, oh, okay, either that they replaced my work, or they changed my work, or they did it this way, I kind of saw it this way. I feel like, now I feel like I'm a conduit too for the board artists, where, if they have a vision, I have the ability to kind of see it through, to, to choose the right audio takes, or to, talk to the timing director, and express what we hope to get done here. And just the overall scope of directing enables me to have no regrets in terms of episodes, to be able to, like I said, follow through on a vision, make sure a gag is played out the way it should be, or make sure that a design, it has a positive impact on the episode. Everyone's working together. I can make sure that, because any production, sometimes communication, maybe this person's not talking to this person, and so I think that being a director, I'm able to make sure that everybody is communicating and on the same page. And I like results, and
to sharpen that pencil, right? Somebody brings a dull pencil to you, like, fuck, man, there's just something wrong with this. It's not putting down the right line. It's not putting down the right amount of this, that, the other. You got to sharpen it. That's what you're there for. You're there to make sure this idea, they come together, and then everything starts flowing together. Because when you have peaks and valleys and everything's missing, and nothing's really cohesive, it looks jumbled. It looks messed up. So I get what you're saying, but nonetheless, man.
I mean, we have some really, really talented people working on the show now, across the board, design boards everywhere. And, and I want to make sure that people feel appreciated for when they do amazing work, when they bust their chops to do good work. And, and I know the heartbreak of seeing, something you're happy with and not come through as you envisioned it. And so, if I can help out in that regard, I want to help out.
And that's the mark of a good boss right there, man. You give a shit about your people. And there's not a lot of people that can say, hey, man, my boss actually cares about what I do. My boss actually gives a shit. Because I see it all the time, especially in kids sports, right? So my kid does sport karate. And we always have like a different instructor coming over, like on Sundays or Saturdays, whenever they're doing team practice. And then they'll pick certain kids, and they're like, hey, I see you doing this, and I see you doing this. And then there was one kid, he's like, you always say something about what I'm doing. And he was like, because I care. If I didn't care, I'm not going to say anything. You could like, oh, he's just over there throwing a side kick. Let him throw a side kick. I'm not going to tell him he's doing it incorrectly. I'm not going to tell him he's leaving himself open from 4 different angles that he can get hit and struck on. He obviously knows what he's doing, right? But it goes to show you what kind of a person he is and how much he gives a shit. And that's what I see in you. You see an artist that might be missing something, right? You see 1 and 1, and then you see 2, but you don't see plus, and you don't see the equal sign. So a director's there putting those perspectives, seeing the different side of the coin, or the different side of the equation, and like I said, really breaking it down for these guys and gals that are in your profession. And you're training your replacement is essentially what I'm getting at. You're trying to make sure the next wave of people that's going to take Dave Cunningham's spot as a director, that they're well prepared, they've been through the trenches, they know what they're doing, so when they see something like this come up, they can solve it. And then when they see somebody else making the same mistakes that you might be seeing, they can fix those mistakes. And all we're doing is trying to make somebody better. And like I said, that's a great sign for somebody that is a good boss, man, and a good supervisor, because half the time people don't give a shit. So it's refreshing to see somebody that actually cares about their people and actually cares about what they're putting out there.
It's not an easy show to work on, man. SpongeBob, they've got 20 years of precedence, and we're breaking down a lot of precedent, but we still got, we got characters that are on lunch boxes. You can only do, we can't, there's not a whole lot of room to redesign a character. It's been around for 20 years. And so, it's, people that, do well and succeed on this show, are super talented. Mm-hmm. And are set up for, really, really nice careers down the line.
Yes, sir. And so we've almost hit that hour mark, man. Well, we've been a little bit over the hour mark. So as we start to, come to an end, I always like to throw, fans questions. And I grabbed some fans questions. Apologize, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't write your names down because it was one of those things. Like I said, I didn't realize like how much work a newborn is because it's been about 11 years since I've had a newborn. So yeah, man, it's definitely I don't want to say a time sucker because it makes it sound like it's a bad thing, because I absolutely love being a dad again, because I missed my oldest son's first 4 years of his life with deployments and workups and all this other stuff. So I didn't get to see him really too much. So it's nice to be able to experience everything I missed. Like I missed first words, first steps, first Christmases, first everything, right? So it's nice to get there and see that. But like I said, I was on a time crunch and I wrote everything down too quickly. So I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for the names. But before we get to that point, right? So I asked you about Tuck. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you what it was like working with the late great Stephen, man. Do you have any stories or any memories that come to mind? When you think of the father of SpongeBob, man.
He was. He was one of the most laid back, nicest guys that I've ever met in the business, and he's always been involved in the show. I guess even when I joined the show in the 4th season, he never really came into the studio very often. He was, from what I heard, traveling quite a bit. But they would always send him all the storyboards to kind of get his approval on. And once every year or two, you'd hear, well, Steve doesn't want to do this with this character.
Yeah.
Very rare. It didn't, from what I gathered anyway, from my lowly position, I didn't hear much about what Steve did. Yeah. But he decided he wanted to come back and join us for the second film. Mm-hmm. And that's when we start seeing him again. And we're all like, oh man, Steve is back. This is awesome. And, he was just, I'd never heard an unkind word out of the guy's mouth. He was just full of compliments and nice things to say whenever he'd see you in the hallway. There was no, I'm not talking to a production assistant. I'm not talking to a designer or board artist. And he had such a great time on the second film, from what I understand, that he joined us on the series again. And, the time when I would spend the most, I would bump into him and chat with him every once in a while. I never had any, deep conversations with him or anything, but we would have a director lunch once a month, and he would go with Vince and Mark and Sharon and I and Adam, and in all the retake sessions where we'd look at the animation, they're just chuckling the whole time. Occasionally he would chime in on, something nautical that he wanted, a little closer to, reality, a little more accurate. But, he, was always supportive, always chuckling, and was just thrilled with, what we were doing with the show, post second movie. One of the biggest thrills I had was, about a year before he passed, I was able to go along with him and all the other showrunners and directors to the Annie Awards and the Emmys, and he got like he got an award at the Annies for his work, and then we actually won an Emmy for the show before he passed as well. And this all happened the year before he passed away, and being able to spend that time with him and see him get acknowledged and get loved so much was really special to see, because he deserved it. And he was a special guy. He was a very talented guy. And before we had I believe the Emmys, he had everybody over to his house, and was walking people around, and there was no pretension, there was no ego. It was just just a really, really sweet man.
So I gotta ask, and when he had you over, man, was it catered or was he cooking? I gotta imagine somebody like that cool probably banging out some grilled cheese sandwiches or something like that. He's like, come on over here, look at the shit.
I don't really remember much of the food. I know that, like, I remember, his wife was like, Karen was super friendly. Yeah. And offering a glass of wine and all. And there was just, no, there was no, like, as I recall, I don't remember there being any help, anyone serving anything at all. But it was, I don't know if it was grilled cheese, but it was, it was just like them having a few friends over, a few friends over for cocktails or whatever. And yeah, it was great to be a part of that.
Well, that's cool, man. Thank you. Like I said, thank you for sharing, the story. RIP to Stephen, RIP to Tuck, man. And like I said, as we start to get to the fans' questions, there's one thing that I'm so grateful that he got, and he got to see that recognition and that love, right? Because so often, as we talked briefly about before we hit record, and how this podcast came about, man, it was, seeing those names pop up and not knowing who those names were. And then going just a little deeper, last year when we lost Kobe Bryant, 41, and the rest of the people on that, I'm a huge basketball fan. So him getting tragically taken away, as well as everybody else, 41, and his daughter at 12 or 13, whatever it was, and everybody else on that helicopter just gone like that, right? And then I was listening to a song, and I don't know if you're into hip hop or anything like that, but there's this guy named Joyner Lucas, and he put out this song called Will, and it was about Will Smith, and about Will Smith was his biggest inspiration when he was younger. He wanted to be Will Smith. He wanted to be the Fresh Prince. He saw all of this. This is the man he looked up to. And he had this line in there, and this album came out right after Kobe died, and it was "Give them a rose while they're still here," right? So to get to see that, or get to hear that, excuse me, that, he got to be remembered. He got to be loved while he was here. And we're talking about Stephen, not so much Kobe right now, because Kobe knew he was loved. I got to imagine he knew he was loved. Knew he was hated, but he knew he was loved. But Stephen specifically, man, to see, the recognition from his peers. I got to imagine what you guys did, what everybody else did whenever they vote for an Annie or they vote for an Emmy. That did something. And I'm pretty sure that he'll, for always, no matter where he's at now, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, he'll always have that up here, and you guys will always have that up here, and the fans of this will always have that up here. So, it's nice to see that somebody got to experience that while they were here. It wasn't posthumously, you know what I mean? And that's why I do this podcast, man. You guys have done something. Obviously, we've been going 20 years, 20 plus years now at this point with SpongeBob. This show has meant a lot to so many people. And I can't thank you guys enough for working on it, but just, coming on here and talking about it, and then just putting out what you guys were talking, just what you're just talking about, putting out, nothing less than a great episode or great content, man. Because I've had fun with this show since I was very small. Now I've got an 11-year-old that, he's trying to tell me he's not into cartoons. He's hitting that stage where he just wants to talk about girls and hang out with girls. And he's like, oh, cartoons are for losers. I'm like, you're going to come back to this shit in about 4 years. Don't give me that shit, because I did it too. But getting to experience these TV shows with my kids. And then, like I said, I got that almost 3-month-old down there. So he's going to be experiencing this. So SpongeBob is never going to go away, man. It's a good thing it doesn't.
I'm enjoying it, man. I'm enjoying it. I think our big fan base is our big target demos are like the really young and college students. I think it's a really nice balance between those two very different crowds.
Because we're getting every joke and every reference that went when we were this tall, but now we're this tall. We're catching everything, man. It's been fantastic.
And you're reading into things we may or may not be intending. So.
Oh, I know. But as like I said, as we start to wind down, man, I like to get you guys on here and give you roses while you're still here, man, because I appreciate everything you've done, Dave, is what I'm getting at. And as we start to rotate into the fans' questions, just whatever comes to your mind first, I guess we'll go from there. Okay. Right? Favorite character, you got one?
Patrick.
Oh, great. I'm a huge Squidward, and I love Patrick as well.
I love dumb humor. That's my favorite. I would love more of it. Patrick's always my favorite. If I could do a dumb joke, I would go that way every time, rather.
Krabby Cat or
they're all fun. I'm fun. I mean, it's funny. People do ask that a lot of times. What's your favorite character? What's your favorite character to draw? Mm-hmm. I think my favorite character to draw may be Krabs, actually, and my least favorite would be Squidward, because Squidward can be a colossal pain in the butt to get correctly. He's very very unique. His head shape just does not really turn. We got to do a lot of little cheats when we rotate his head. But yeah, Patrick, I love, scenes with Patrick, and Plankton's always really fun too, because it's
Yes.
fun to play with that angry man in that small body.
That really Napoleon complex. And I'm glad you brought up Mr. Krabs, because Mr. Krabs is always $1,000,000 has been my favorite episode of anything. Just him, and then all the memes that have come from that specific. Like somebody had one with an actual real crab claw, and it was holding on to a $1 bill that was passing around. And I got to go back and find this meme. It was just something stupid. It's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to go to sleep. And then I'm just scrolling through social media, and I see that I bust out laughing. I'm in tears. I can't breathe. My wife thinks I'm having a heart attack. She's like, "What's going on?" And I'm showing her, and she's like, "Did you really wake me up for this bullshit?" And I'm like, "Yes, this is hilarious." So stupid humor. We were just talking about it. I love it too, man.
And it's funny, Mr. Krabs. This popped in my head when you were saying that. Mr. Krabs, obviously voiced by Clancy Brown.
Mhm.
I didn't really quite make the connection, Clancy Brown, that name with the Clancy Brown, the actor we've seen a million times in a million films and TV shows. But I think I kind of discovered in my head, after working on the show for 10 years, I discovered at one point that he was that guy, that Clancy Brown. And at that time, that's when Lost was really big, and he actually was on Lost, and he came to the studio one time. I think I was genuinely starstruck based on that stupid show Lost. So I was like a fanatic at the time. He decided to, when entertainment was at a premium last year in the pandemic, and there was not a lot of original content coming out. I actually watched it through with my kids again. So your father loved this show. Let's watch this show. And I think we got to like the 4th or 5th season. I'm like, okay, guys, if you want to hit the eject button now, you can. I'm going to leave this to you. And they're like, no, we want to ride this through. And they're like, man, it's getting weird, Dad. Yeah, I know, it is getting old. Good time travel now. It's getting crazy. And no, but I mean, they enjoyed it. And and I was, of course, was like, yeah, there's Mr. Krabs right there.
What'd they think about the ending? I'd love to hear a kid's perspective on the ending of that.
They thought it was weird. They were fine. I mean, yeah. I mean, there was just so many checks that were written on that show that there's no way they could cash them all, at any point. And, I think if nothing else, it served as like a cautionary tale for other shows that build a mythology like that, that build a canon, that they can't just they got to track all that stuff and make sure that they're coming around to it again. They're not just creating mystery just to create mystery. But
yeah, I mean, another big one would be a lot of fans were upset with the way the Game of Thrones ended. I don't know if you were a Game of Thrones fan, but
yeah,
I was thoroughly enjoyed with the entire. I mean, I feel like they could have done something different, but that's just me nitpicking. Overall, like I said, I couldn't have done any better. If they would have gave me $1 billion, say, "Hey, finish this shit," I'm like, man, no, I'm not cashing this check, because I'm not gonna piss anybody off. So
I may whine about Lost or Game of Thrones, but I mean, I'll watch them again. They were just great rides. I mean, I mean, it's got to be tough to land a show that you've been building for whatever 5 seasons, and with such a broad story with so many characters. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you do that perfectly. So
I mean, the only people that seem to have done it has been Marvel at Disney. I mean, they seem to be wrapping everything up with a bow, something that you forgot about, and offshoot of a movie.
My God, what a headache that must be to track all that, all those storylines, all those details, I mean, the canon that they create, and being able, because new movies come out and you see all these fans saying, yeah, because my kids are big into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All these little details they're dropping from other episodes. Oh, that means this means this. Oh, they're referencing this. Like, my God, that's got to be a lot of work. And what a headache. And that's why I'm so thankful I work on SpongeBob, where we really have no canon at all. That we basically hit the reset button with every single episode. As much as fans would like to create canon, which they do.
Trust me, they do.
Not building it.
Well, I'm pretty sure if you're loaded like Kevin Feige is, and then you can just go,
oh yeah,
peel off them hundreds. You could put a whole bunch of nerds in one little boardroom, and it looks like a serial killer in there with everything pointing to this and circled and all that other shit.
Or something. Yeah.
But so we got you said Patrick. So if you had your one last meal, right, and you had to choose the Chum Bucket or the Krusty Crab, where are you going? And what are you ordering?
I'm intrigued by Chumbalaya at the Chum Bucket because I'm a big Jambalaya fan.
Yeah.
I mean, and Krusty Crab was too obvious a choice, right? I mean, you gotta like.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's a great pat.
That fan movie.
I'm going to really digress here, but when we were on the second movie, they had all that live action stuff they did at the end, and they needed a live action Krabby Patty. Well, Steve had always maintained that he was vegetarian and that the Krabby Patty had no meat in it, and that was always his thing. So it was going to be some sort of veggie based burger. And they were trying to create something that looked like that could be the Krabby Patty. And there was a day where we were doing character layout, and we had this big kitchen where we had all this food stocked in there. And one day we opened up the fridge, and there was a cookie sheet just full of like potential Krabby Patties that were just laying out there, and they all just looked so nasty. They're all like a shade of like gross green, and I don't think they ended up with any of them at all, but they were like kind of exploring what they want to go for with the look of it. And yeah, I think it was a tough spot they were in, where they didn't want the Krabby Patty to look like it was meat based, but they also didn't want it to look repulsive either, that people would actually want to eat this thing. But no, as far as what I would eat, I don't know. I mean, I would, if I'm fortunate enough to like stumble into Bikini Bottom, for a few hours, I'm going to go for it. I'm ordering the jambalaya. I want to know how Plankton does with the Creole food.
Man, I gotta imagine that's gonna be a gut bomb, and you're gonna be shitting your guts out.
I do always laugh when I see the menu in the background. I see that jambalaya towards the bottom, like, that's great.
Now, this one I think would be fun because you can't use SpongeBob because he's already got a show, and you can't use Patrick because he's already got his show.
Yeah.
But if you had the keys to the kingdom, who are you taking out of the show and giving their own show?
I do not have the keys to the kingdom, as everybody knows. So let's start with that. So I have no say in this matter whatsoever.
But if you did,
if I did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, trying to think of all our periphery characters. We got Bubble Bass, we got Perch, we got Larry. Mrs. Puff is kind of fun. Bubble Bass is fun, but he's kind of like a stereotype. I mean, I have incidentals that I like too that we use. They're just background characters, but they don't have personalities yet or identities yet. We just place them, plop them down wherever we want to pluck them down. Mm-hmm. Maybe Mrs. Puff, because I'm not sure who I mean, it'd be interesting. We haven't really ever explored her backstory at all or her world at all, other than just being kind of crabby, and her kind of suggested side romance with Mr. Krabs.
She's the B. Arthur of SpongeBob. Whenever I see Mrs. Puff, I just think of Dorothy from the Golden Girls.
Yeah, her voice has that
that shrillness.
Yeah, not sure what that is, but there's a similarity there. But it's a good question. I always like to go for the less obvious choices with things, and so probably, I mean, I think I'm not sure which characters are not going to have spin-offs, and that's not based on me knowing anything. It's just like, I can't imagine they won't do all of our mains at some point. But that's just me just shooting. I have no knowledge of anything.
Yeah.
But it's funny, like, there are incidentals that we just know by number, because we have a big sheet of incidental characters that are just identified by number.
Yeah.
And we just fill out scenes with them and label them by their numbers, for animation for overseas. But some fans know them by name, and for years they were calling our incidental number one Fred. And I'm not aware that we ever called him Fred before, but eventually the writers just and showrunners kind of succumbed to it, and they just made number one, incidental number one Fred. And then on top of that, they tied him down as the My Leg guy, because before we would swap out the My Leg guy for anybody we wanted. I mean, it was incidental like 107, whoever we wanted was the My Leg guy. But now we've got that locked down as
Fred.
Fred as the My Leg guy. And I know that there's been a little bit more naming of characters that used to be just numbered recently. So I don't know if that's going to become a thing where we just start giving names to people, but yeah. I mean, we had our social marketing team did something fun a year or two ago, where they were making fun of the fact that we refer to the same character by different names and in living different lifestyles from episode to episode. Like one episode he's married, one episode he's homeless, one episode and we're calling a person by different names. And they did this whole bit where like, what's going on here? This is a mystery we got to solve. Where this character is, is he going by a secret name? Is he living a secret lifestyle? And they're really fun little short little bits they did, kind of mocking the fact that we don't really have any continuity or identifying of background characters at all.
All right, and this is the last question, man, and this one's a good one. If you got it now, it's a hypothetical because you have to assume that everybody's technically seen SpongeBob, with a few exceptions, like somebody that just doesn't have TV wherever they're at. I got to imagine that SpongeBob is just as well known as Coca-Cola, Batman, Superman, and all these other things. You see a yellow sponge, you're like, oh shit, that's SpongeBob, right?
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind with this question, if you had to, and this is how I get around saying, hey, what's your favorite episode ever? If you had to talk to somebody, so say me and you were talking, I don't know anything about SpongeBob. If you had to recommend one episode that you would say, hey, you will love this show because of this one episode, what is that one episode recommendation that you would give to somebody that's never seen SpongeBob?
I'm gonna have to recall the actual titles of the early. It's not gonna be an episode I worked on. I typically say Chocolate with Nuts as my favorite episode, but I think like an episode, the one with the box. And
the imagination one.
I'm ashamed to say I don't know the actual title of that one, or the paper. I like the real simple ones where they had like just the gum wrapper paper or the box they're hiding in the whole time. I think that encapsulates the silliness of our show, and how funny the characters are with the most non-existent of premises. And yeah, I think those were home runs. I think they really captured what the show was about.
Was it called Idiot Box?
The Idiot Box, yeah, that's it. And then
was that the episode?
It was maybe the rapper or the I'm sure the SpongeBob fan base would be outraged by my forgetting this right now, but
oh man, they're nerds anyways. I mean, they're only going to write you on a couple hundred tweets and you should have said this, you should have said that.
They're early season episodes I was not a part of, but I loved them. And but those, I think those, just like I said, the pure charm of those, the silliness of those, they're genuinely funny to anybody that watches them, not just kids. And they're very light on storyline. It's just silly and funny for 11 minutes, and it's a fun ride.
It really is, man. And this has been a fun ride as well. Dave, I hope you had fun, man, because I know I did. It was cool getting to talk finally to somebody in the SpongeBob cast, man. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for asking, Julian. Had a great time.
No problem, man. Well, first off, I forgot to plug. Is there anything that you're working on? Obviously, we know the Patrick Show, Camp Coral's out. Is there anything that's big coming up that you say, hey, make sure you check the date for this, that, and the other? Anything coming down the pike that we should know about?
You know what? We are doing more Camp Corals, more Patrick Show, and more SpongeBob. All three shows are happening, and we are making more SpongeBob content than ever before. The SpongeBob universe is expanding. There's going to be no shortage of content for people to watch. And hopefully there are not going to be large gaps in time that the fans will have to wait for episodes, because we are building a bigger and bigger crew. So get excited, because there's some really funny stuff coming your way.
Beautiful. And Dave, where can they find you if they want to say, hey, this was the episode you were talking about, or hey, Dave, I love what you're doing, man? Where can they find you?
Well, my Twitter is probably the place I interact with fans the most. And let me make sure. Mancy Rains is my handle on Twitter. Let's see here. It's MANCIERAINES.
Beautiful. And we always put the people's profiles and whatever else they want us. They're working on a show, they're working on something. We always make sure we put it in the description. So there will be a link straight in the description bottom where you go and find where Dave's at, actually, and you say, hey, I like this.